Next, we'll be hearing from Senator Brad Bekkedahl, Senator Mark Enget, and Representative Craig Headland. Please help me welcome these gentlemen as they join me on the stage to discuss the kinds of legislative policy that will pave the way for North Dakota's oil and gas production future. Gentlemen, it seems like it's been a long time since you adjourned sine die in May, but today we're going to have an interesting discussion. So here at the NDPC, we know that policy and politics don't just shape the industry on paper, they directly impact the decisions our members make every day about whether to invest, to expand, or to innovate here in North Dakota. Our state's success in oil and gas development is always dependent on a strong partnership between industry and policymakers. And today we're fortunate to have with us 3 legislators who have played a key role in strengthening that relationship and partnership. Rather than rehashing past votes or bills that you may or may not have introduced, our goal is in this discussion is just simply to look ahead at the challenges, opportunities, and big questions facing North Dakota's oil and gas industry. We'll explore how we keep North Dakota competitive and as a good place to invest capital dollars, how we unlock the next phase of resource development, and how state policy can support innovation while protecting energy freedoms. And so with that, let's dive in. We're going to start with Representative Headland. Representative Headland, you are the senior legislator on our panel, and I believe you started in 2003 in the State House of Representatives. You also serve as the chair of the House Finance and Taxation Committee, and you've been a key player in helping to craft some of the leading incentives that help bridge the economic gap in allowing companies to take the risks that they do in North Dakota and drive the industry forward. You're also a recipient of our Outstanding Public Service Award, so we're really pleased to have you on the stage today. Please share your thoughts on some of the incentives that your committee, your Finance and Taxation Committee, has taken in the past several legislative sessions, and do that from your finance and tax perspective.
Well, thank you, Brady, first of all, for asking us to be here to share some policy directives with this group that's so very vital and important to the state of North Dakota. Now, where to start on incentives? I think I'll just start with one of the incentives we passed last session, House Bill 1483, which was currently in law as an incentive for non-Bakken production. It didn't seem like it was getting properly utilized the way it was written, so in discussions with the Petroleum Council, we decided to make some tweaks where we got rid of some antiquated language and boundaries nearing the Bakken, and came with a number of production levels that we thought was the place to start. Now, as everyone knows, in policy, changes as you learn more, the policy gets tweaked before it gets put into passage and signed by the governor, and that happened with House Bill 1483. What we learned along the way was that at the levels of exemption, the 2% exemption from the extraction tax maybe wasn't going to have the impact or the effect in trying to encourage some production in these non-Bakken formations. And there's 10 or 15 different formations out there that are really underutilized today. And our job as policymakers is to try to get policy into place that will encourage some activity out in those areas. And I think where we ended up with on House Bill 1483 at 300,000 barrels exempt at 2%, it really hopefully will encourage some activity out there. And I'm not aware that it has, but when we meet next week and in the future, in interim tax committee meetings, hopefully we'll hear some information that it actually has improved in and created and generated some activity out in those areas.
Well, Representative Headland, we really appreciate your efforts in priming that bill as it went forward, and really look forward to the impact it will have in driving development outside of the Bakken, but continuing the Bakken play, obviously, but expanding that growth in energy production and getting more oil from our rock. I'm going to turn now to Senator Mark Enget, who just completed his first legislative session, but nonetheless took on roles that were very important to the industry, including as a member of the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee and the Senate Industry and Business Committee. Senator Enget, first session, what are your first impressions of the legislative process and feelings on the outcomes of your first session? You can go into any detail you'd like, the general feel of the session and how it struck you. Just interested in your freshman legislative perspective.
Okay, thank you, Brady. I appreciate that. Coming in as a freshman, as already been said, it was honestly a bit shocking because you come into the role knowing next to nothing, you get a minimal amount of training, and you're expected to perform from day one. The problem is you don't really know what you're doing yet. And so I was somewhat amazed at the number of bills we had. We get 80 days, 4 months, and we had 1,000 bills in front of us. And of course, these bills are filled with technicalities, legalese, and conundrums that aren't easy to figure out. So digesting all of the information that I was being fed on a daily basis, sometimes we'd go through 30 bills, and learning the protocols and procedures and the places to be and who to talk to. It really took building a network of people that I trusted in order to be able to perform my job. Because if you didn't have that sort of brotherhood, I guess you would say, and people you can depend upon, like Craig and Brad here, it would be very, very difficult. But the good thing is they're all aware of the situation, and they do everything they can to help you. So all in all, I got through it. It took me about a month, I would say, before I started feeling somewhat comfortable with everything that was going on. But a very positive experience, and very happy to be here.
Well, Senator Enget, just as a follow-up to that, I'm just asking for tips. Maybe this is selfish, but how can industry best help incoming legislators like you to better understand the industry's perspective and make informed policy decisions? Like you said, you're drinking from a fire hydrant in terms of information that's being put forth before you at one very quick time. We only have 80 days, and that's a very short time period. So what can we best do as an industry to help the understanding progress?
Well, that's a great question. Some things are already being done, but the problem now is going to be compounded as well, because we come in and we learn the ropes, so to speak, but we have a lot of senior people within the organization who can guide new legislators. As we come into term limits, the time is going to be severely shortened, and we're all going to be expected to perform at much higher levels simply because time is really of the essence when we come to something like this. So I've spoken to our chair, Mr. Hogue, Senator Hogue, and said with AI and all the benefits that brings, I really think that an online training system where you're able to participate in sessions in front of a computer before you get there would be tremendously beneficial. Of course, that doesn't happen overnight, but I think we really have to look very closely at how we manage this process and how we can help incoming legislators. You'll always have some who have been there a bit of time, but like I said, term limits has kind of turned everything upside down with that as well. And it's really going to complicate the process because now there just isn't time to absorb all that you need to absorb to really be efficient and effective at what you're doing.
Well, it's definitely not a small challenge by any means, especially compounded, like you mentioned, with the term limit discussion. Senator Bekkedahl, we're going to turn over to you. Now, not only do you serve as the chair of the Senate Appropriations Committee, but you're also the vice chair of Budget Section, which oversees financial decisions that the legislative body has during the interim. You also serve on the Williston City Commission, and you've served there as the finance commissioner for quite a while. and we're thankful for what you do for that community. In that role, you've seen some pretty unprecedented growth. I remember when I was with what's now the Western Dakota Energy Association, and I first had the chance to meet you. We had a lot of conversations about the distribution formula for the gross production tax and so on. I know one of your top priorities, just from that history, has been making sure infrastructure in Western North Dakota gets the attention it needs and the investment it needs to sustain that kind of growth. Now, in the oil and gas industry, one of the key pieces of successful development is also infrastructure, as you are very well aware. Can you please speak to the importance of that to the state and what can or should be done at the state level to help that infrastructure to progress?
Well, thanks, Brady. I appreciate being here, and thank you, everybody, for attending as well. And my role as the Senate Appropriations Chair, we obviously deal with a lot of dollars in a lot of agencies, but the DOT budget is a primary agency we deal with, and we work hand in hand with the Finance and Tax Committee people, Craig here as well, on that issue. But one of the things that we found out early on was the oil field works, as you all know, 24/7, 365 days a year. Holidays is not a word you hear in the oil patch very often. So with that, you have to get the workforce to the work sites, and you need to have good roads to get them to those work sites. I take it a step further and say we don't just want good roads, we want safe roads. And so we've put a lot of emphasis lately in the Highway 85 corridor, which is Western North Dakota's north-south corridor that transpires through all of our production areas that we have. So that's an important roadway for us. I've just had a discussion with the mayor, Scott Decker from Dickinson. He said, you know, their emphasis is when their crews leave Dickinson in the morning to go to a job site up north, they want them to hit 85 in a 4-lane position so that they get there safely and they get home to their families safely as well. So we can't overemphasize that in any degree. What we do in appropriations is we obviously work with the DOT director to boost his budget for these special projects. We know there's needs statewide, but we also know we have funding capabilities through the generous revenue that the oil and gas producers give us through the taxation policy to get those things done. So this year we will start with a fall bidding on a 26 and 27 construction of another 20-mile segment of Highway 85 to 4-laning. We're essentially twinning the existing 2 lanes. And then hopefully in the next session, we can tackle some type of funding, whether it's direct funding or possibly look at bonding for the remaining 30 miles to get us to Interstate 94. And that, in our mind, completes the majority of the corridor. We obviously have more to do south of there to get to the other states that we deal with, but safety is a primary concern. Finding the funding is always a primary concern. But the partnership we enjoy with your companies in all of our communities, as one member of your industry told me one time, our people live in your towns. We want the best towns we can have, and we want the safest places we can have to live in. So these partnerships between the state, the industry, and the DOT working with the legislature all makes that happen. So we're really joyous that we can make the progress we have so far, but without getting people to work sites, that's the important part of linear infrastructure.
Senator Bekkedahl, thanks for that. As chair of Senate Appropriations, you also saw a major piece of infrastructure investment in what's come to be known as the Bakken East Pipeline. Can you speak to that and what that means for Western North Dakota and particularly for the city of Williston and the surrounding area?
So obviously gas is an issue. Stranded gas is becoming an issue as our gas-oil ratios change over time. We get more gas with less oil, and I think that's just a development that occurs in every formation, in every oil field around the world. But we don't want to strand that gas. First of all, we don't want to waste it. Flaring was a waste. We don't want to strand it, because stranding it means we can't punch more holes to get more oil out of the ground, to get more taxes and more prosperity for the residents of North Dakota between the workforce and everybody else who lives here. So we need to get that development done. The $50 million per year subsidy, I hope it functions as it is intended, which is a subsidy and not a capacity purchase. I'm hopeful that now with that in place, in the next few years, that they will line up enough end user contracts along that line through WBI that people can buy the production off of that. The capacity will be bought by private industry and not be paid for by the state. I think that's the way that it's going to work. If not, the state is there to back that up and get the gas moving to where it needs to be used.
Just as an insurance policy of sorts.
Correct, yeah.
Okay. Thanks for that. Representative Headland, back to you. Infrastructure investments like we've been discussing on the state level can take a lot of money. And as the source of over 50% of North Dakota's revenue portfolio, the oil and gas industry certainly plays a heavy part in balancing the state's budget. One of the issues discussed this session was one of the tax exemptions that's been in existence for a number of years that some legislators identified as an area of concern, really because the amounts of the exemption continue to grow over time as wells age. And I'm talking, of course, about the stripper well tax exemption that reduces or eliminates the extraction tax for stripper wells. For Bakken assets, that's wells that produce 35 barrels or less per day for a period of 1 year. Can you tell us, the issue boiled over into ultimately becoming a legislative interim study. Can you tell us, I'm interested in your thoughts really, on this, the background of the stripper well tax exemption, why it's there, its relevance to the industry, and what the legislative body kind of has in mind going forward on that topic?
Sure. Well, first of all, as everyone here knows, stripper wells are not new to this industry. They've been around for a long time. And I think prior to the incentive to keep those wells producing, they were being shut in and locked in. And how that is really kind of a waste of resources when they still are actively producing, even at a smaller level. I think they do add a real economic benefit. So I think there's real rational reasons for the incentive. Now, I think the number of wells that kind of came to light this last session maybe crept up on legislators, and there was concern about some that, as reliant as we've become on oil revenues for our budgetary needs, what could happen in a time where new production is not keeping up with the amount of wells that are dropping off the extraction tax because of their stripper status. So I think it was decided that it would be important to take a look, find out what's happening, see if there's more that we can do in regards to policy to either incent reinvestment in reworking a well before it gets depleted and down to that stripper status and things like that. But unless you have a look at it, it's kind of hard for a legislator and a whole legislative body to come into a session and try to take on that kind of responsibility during a session. So the only way to really do it is by an interim study, and I think that's what was decided and voted on and passed.
I know one of the issues was that stripper well, that tax exemption, once a well qualifies as a stripper well,
it's always
considered a stripper well. And so I expect that that's something that the committee will take up and look at.
I'm sure we will. Now, I can't sit here and promise that, it might not be looked at in a way that might seem contrary to what we're been trying to do in the past. I really don't know what to expect. I think in part it's reliant on what some of the other incentives that we put into place can achieve. If together these policy decisions can create an environment where we can continue to maintain production at levels where we're at that fit the needs of North Dakota's budget, I think there's no reason to change that exemption. But, I can't foresee the future, and we'll just have to see how it plays out. But, I don't think there's any legislator, at least none that I run with, that are anxious to go out and start taxing a well that's not producing very much and that has been exempt from the extraction tax. So.
Well, we appreciate that. Senator Enget, in addition to protecting our state's wells that are in the later stages of their development cycle and producing lives, we've got a lot of new wells being developed. Senator Enget, you live near Powers Lake. You were kind enough to invite Ron Ness and I to your house, where we got to enjoy some delicious pie that your wife baked. That area is in a region that's seeing some really new growth up in that northwest corner of the state. Can you speak to the challenges and opportunities that you've witnessed in the Northwest as they pertain to the oil and gas development?
Well, there are many, and thank you for the question. And I could go on for quite some time here, but I'll try and keep it brief and talk to the points that are most important. We welcome the activity. We've been waiting for it. And honestly, it's something that's very, very good for any county to experience. It brings in employment, it brings in families, it brings a lot of opportunities to the area. The problems we've been running into is that we've been a lesser producing county for some time now. Jeff Simon, you've heard plenty of him and all he's done. He was very helpful to me as well. But one of the things he came to me and said was, Mark, maybe there's something we can do to help your county and the lesser producing counties. And when I say lesser producing county, that's a county that produces less than 5 million barrels a day, or a year, I'm sorry. And so the problem becomes we have the greater producing counties, that's the Williams, McKenzie, Dunn, Montreal, and they produce over 80 million barrels a day, but we border them. Williams is right to the west of us, Montreal right to the south, and all the traffic comes right through Burke County, and our roads were getting beat to death. So he helped me put legislation in place there that there's a longer story to that, but I'll leave it at that. You know, keeping the infrastructure, keeping your bridges safe, keeping your roads safe, as Senator Bekkedahl has said, it's a challenge because there simply is not enough funding to do it. The other thing we run into is we have a town of about 380 people. And it's a small town. It's a great town, but it's a small town. But we have 234 kids in our high school. And that's pre-K through 12, and we don't have enough room for them. Now, we welcome the families, we welcome the growth, but because we have a county where the land values are lower, we're at the top of our mill levy, and we don't have enough income to build. We're short 3 classrooms. We have a vocational agriculture department that, or a facility that was there when I was a kid. We're still playing, and we've got 234 kids in one gym. So it brings challenges that aren't easy to overcome. And I'd really like to look at this next session about how we can do some kind of equalization or bring in some further revenues for these counties that are experiencing this tremendous growth. And honestly, the schools aren't able to appropriately care for those kids and the education they need. Now, they're doing a great job. I'm not saying that anybody's dropping the ball here, but it creates challenges that makes it very, very difficult. The other thing is, you know, the water is no longer used for fracking, is no longer being taken by truck to the well site. It's being piped. And that's a very good thing because, again, the roads are already taking plenty of abuse. But at the same time, it creates a problem where many of our water resources in the county are really being drawn down. And so I worry about the longer term as we see more and more activity, where all that water is going to come from and how it's going to affect fish and game and other things that are also important to the community. And one other thing that's happening with, I'm on the planning and zoning in our county as well, that they're starting to ship salt water through these temporary lines. And I'm very concerned about that because they are known to leak, and it's an environmental hazard. So we're working through a lot of issues, but all in all, I'm very much all about the energy industry and helping them work more efficiently and effectively again.
Well, we appreciate that too. Senator Bekkedahl, as chair of the Senate Appropriations Committee, you are very well aware of the financial situation in North Dakota and the importance of passing a balanced budget. One of the big pushes you had during the last session centered on a $25 million package designed to encourage investments in research and development aimed at improved oil recovery. You want to talk a little bit about what drove your passion towards that? And I noticed there was a continued appropriation added to a bill that you prime sponsored related to helping out the city of Williston and the other hub cities. Talk about the Oil and Gas Research Council and the importance of driving innovation through research.
Well, thanks, Brady. And we get to these stages because the industry comes to us with the issues that they have and the issues they're trying to overcome that will relate to the industry in their practices in the field. And we're fortunate in North Dakota that we have the Energy Environmental Research Center up in Grand Forks, have had for a long time, and they are the primary research organization for oil and gas in this state. Not many states have that like we do, so I think that's a real plus for us. We've for many years now been allocating funding on a biennium basis to the Oil and Gas Research Council, which is industry people that actually look at production efforts or exploratory efforts and take the information that they have to the EERC and say, how can you help us get more out of the Bakken? How can you help us get more out of this formation? Or how can you help us work with surfactants and all these other things that are chemically related? So we did put in $17.5 million in that bill, as you mentioned, Brady, to continue the funding for the Energy Research Council. And they'll do grants not just to the ERC, but other entities as well. Some to your companies out here for pilot projects you do as well. But if you don't drive research, if you don't provide funding to drive research, you're stagnating and going backwards. We have to continue to promote the development of the industry for the benefit of all of us here and the benefit of all the residents of North Dakota. The other thing we did is a few years ago, we set up the state research, the State Energy Research Center in Grand Forks as well. So what they do is we gave them an appropriation this year of $5 million per biennium. We jumped it to 7.5. We tried to get it to 10, didn't quite get there last year. But that research center takes research that helps to get from exploratory stage of something to development to actually commercially producing some things. That's the importance. We can do research, but you have to apply it to a larger level, and that's where the importance of the $25 million we have for that next project, which is we've done smaller pilot projects with some funding through the Oil and Gas Research Council that help in the field in terms of the Bakken exploration and trying to incentivize more production out of that. But that $25 million that was brought to us by Ron and yourself was critical to look at a larger project, to go from something small to something larger, to say, now this works. And we're happy to do that. And we appreciate that input, because without you coming to us, we have no idea about how to move this industry forward. So it was a win-win for everybody.
We happen to think so too, and I think that what we heard this morning from Dr. Harju is that there's quite a bit of interest in that big package for improved oil recovery. So we're excited about that and what that will lead to in terms of innovation in the industry moving forward. I know we're kind of getting a little short on time, so we're going to move to a rapid fire question session. Representative Headland, what are some of the challenges ahead in keeping North Dakota the place to invest capital?
Well, right now, Brady, I would have to say I think it's not in my backyard. When it comes to infrastructure and energy production, whether it be oil and gas or coal-fired electricity or what it may be, the challenge of getting easements and the like are becoming more and more complicated and challenging. And I think the fact that the public good doesn't seem to matter like it used to, and I don't know if that's a generational thing or what are the reasons, but it's complicated, and I think, I don't have the solution, but I think it, as everything does, probably revolves around money.
Thanks for that candid answer. Senator Enget, kind of a follow-up to that. How does the state industry and individuals best work together to strike the right balance between infrastructure needs in the state and our oil and gas industry and private property ownership interests?
Yeah, thank you, Brady. I've had many, many discussions with property owners and people within industry. And as Representative Headland has said, it's a very difficult thing to solve. But the people I've talked to all understand that progress is necessary. They're not against it. And I think some of the approaches that have been utilized in approaching the needs of the overall good of North Dakota have been sidestepped. And North Dakota people are very reasonable. And if you talk to them respectfully and you work towards a solution and discuss it in a way that resonates and makes sense to them, there's a way through it. It won't be easy, and there's going to have to be some compromise on both sides. Property rights are important, there's no question about it, but so is the overall good of the people of North Dakota. So we have to work through that. We have to find the way to do it. I don't have the quick solution, unfortunately, as Representative Headland said. It's a tough one. It's tough not to crack.
I'm sure we'll have a lot of vibrant discussions on how to best do that. Senator Bekkedahl, turning now to you and moving on to kind of a public sentiment towards the oil and gas industry. Yesterday, our board of directors heard that overall in North Dakota, we have an 85% favorable rating as an oil and gas industry in the North Dakota public. Can you speak to us about how things have changed in your area of the state and how industry's fit kind of works? How do communities in Western North Dakota talk about the oil and gas industry now versus 10 years ago?
Well, thanks, Brady. That's a tough question, but I'll try to answer as best I can. I come from a perspective of having been born and raised in Williston. My family's been there 120 years. I have a perspective that goes back a long time in that community. To where we are today, 65% of the workforce in Williston, North Dakota is directly related to the oil and gas industry. And that 65% of that workforce has turned Williston from a dying community to a vibrant and growing community. So we have a great relationship with the industry. They want to see the community succeeds, and we want them to succeed with us. So the partnerships have been great between the industry and us. I will tell you that during the boom years, that was a very difficult time on everybody. When everybody was out there with 200 plus oil rigs drilling out primary leases to hold lease acreage so they could come in and develop it in a harvest mode after that, put severe strains on all of our communities out in Western North Dakota. And I will tell you that being on the city commission, there were times when you're 6 hours into a commission meeting and you're just tired of hearing about the complaints. But fortunately, the state of North Dakota, working with those communities and the industry, has stepped up to give us the resources to handle the impacts and make things better. Could we do more? Obviously, we always could do more. But I'm thankful for where we're at today because, again, we're now a vibrant community and a growing community and no longer a dying community. And I think that I speak for all of the communities of Western North Dakota with that sentiment.
Thanks for that encouraging sentiment, Senator. Final question to you all, in closing comments, if you will. Representative Headland, can you walk us through what you see as the top energy issue moving forward into the next session?
The top energy issue?
What's the top of the list in terms of what the legislative priority should be for oil and gas moving into the next session?
Well, I think legislatively, it is to either maintain current levels or increase production, and finding avenues to, spread that wealth across the state of North Dakota. I think we're going to go and make big strides towards that with this pipeline that we've talked about. That's going to go from the west to the east. It's going to bring gas to the east in communities that have needed it for a long time. It's also going to help with the production because the stranded gas issue and how that stymies production at times. So I think, as my legislative perspective, anything we can do policy-wise to encourage more of what we're contemplating now is my top priority.
Thanks, Representative. Senator Enget, same question to you. Just curious what your top legislative priorities for the oil and gas sector related legislation might be next session.
Well, Representative Headland did a good job on that one, and I really think perhaps the most important thing, and that's for everybody in here, is cracking the nut of the Bakken and secondary recovery, sweeping the formation, getting all of the oil out of there. We're leaving so much oil behind today, and finding a way to do that, investing in the future to recover that oil is going to be superbly important to the success of the oil industry in North Dakota in the coming years. So I would put that right at the top tier.
Senator Enget, I know during the interim you serve on the Energy Development Transmission Committee. Senator Bekkedahl, you as well. So this question can be kind of shared. But one of the topics that was assigned to your interim committee dealt with the electrical loads and high users of electricity of North Dakota, particularly data centers, but others. As you're well aware, we have a high energy demand. Of course, tomorrow we're focusing an entire panel on power and powering the Bakken. But what can you tell us about what the interim committee has dived into so far in looking at how that balance occurs in the state between existing users and incoming large load generators?
So thanks, Brady. We had a meeting in Ellendale a couple of weeks ago where we toured the facilities that they're building in that community. A massive scale of development, billions of dollars of infrastructure just in buildings alone being put into that. But what a great diversification of our economy. Taking excess energy production in North Dakota, adding value to it by putting the data centers in North Dakota where we can have the employees, we can have the tax base, and we can have the use of the electricity. If you look at statistics, one of the things we've found out is that North Dakota used to send a great amount of our energy production out of the state. If you look at the last 5 years, we're now starting to claw back a lot of that production and use it in the state. So I think the critical aspect we're going to be looking at in the Energy Development Committee is how can we continue to make happen value-added energy production in North Dakota being used by our people for our people? And that's going to be a big topic.
Excellent. Senator Bekkedahl, just to cap it all off, top energy and oil and gas specific issues that you're looking forward to in the next session? I know it's a little early.
Well, I don't have any real things that I need to look at, to be honest with you. I rely on the policy people to give us the input about what we should be doing as relative to the appropriation side. We're more driven by them than they are by us, I think. So I work with Craig and our chair in finance and tax as well. But I think Craig kind of talked a little bit about it when he talked about the not in my backyard syndrome. I mean, we have to figure out whether it's through better communication or more efforts to bring people along with the progress you're developing for our state and bring them along in that so that they're not anti-development, but they're for the development because it brings so much more prosperity to all of us. So I think I don't know how to handle it, and it's not a priority for me, but I think it's going to loom large in the next session on how we deal with that.
Well, I appreciate that, Senator, and if there's anything we can do as an industry to help you, all three of you, make good decisions and be informed when you're taking votes and introducing legislation, please let us know. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate your leadership on driving sound policy that supports the oil and gas industry forward. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me thank our panelists today. And we'll let them get off the stage. Thank you, gentlemen.
Well, thank you, Brady.
Yeah. Thank you, Brady. You bet.